Hey there, it's Jacques from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to part 4 of our 6-part Oath of the Gatewatch set review. So previously, we've looked at all the white cards, we've looked at the blue, we looked at the black. Today we're going to look at all of the red cards. Tomorrow we'll be back with green, and then finally we'll wrap it up the next day with the colorless cards. After that, we'll be back on Thursday with a pre-release primer, hopefully get you ready for that pre-release. But having said that, let's jump into the new cards. First, we have a Calm Flame Seeker. So this is a 3/2 for 3, so it's a decent limited card. It has a good size body for the casting cost. As far as its cohort ability, it's not one of the more exciting ones. It's okay, but the fact that it's a rummager and not a looter is a little disappointing considering you're spending 3 for this card. Granted, if it was looting, it would probably have to be a blue card, but I do think that there's more powerful cohort spells out there. Having said that, I do think that it's fine and playable in limited, and if you are in the ally cohort strategy and it's going through red, then yeah, this will be very playable for you. Next is Boulder Salvo, and this is limited removal. It's not good enough really to cross over into standard, especially considering it only does 4 damage to a creature at sorcery speed. It's not going to get rid of Siege Rhinos or Tasigur right now, but you'll be happy to play this in limited when you need removal. The surge cost is very nice. That really makes it a little more desirable, and a lot of decks will be able to take advantage of that. But like I said, you might not always be thrilled to play this, but you'll be very happy that it exists to take out some creatures. Next is Brute Strength, and this is a really fine limited card. It's very similar to Titan Strength. You pay 1 more, but instead of Scry, you get Trample, and that's actually kind of awesome. So I wouldn't mind playing a few copies of this in my limited deck. If you're in a board stall, or maybe you just have a big creature that keeps getting chump blocked, this can just get in for some damage, perhaps win you the game. Next is Chandra Flamecaller. So when this was originally leaked, a lot of people felt like this was too expensive. She can't protect herself. She doesn't have those qualities of a great planeswalker. However, the way I'm looking at this card is, imagine if this was a sorcery that said 2 red, 4 generic, discard all cards in your hand, then draw that many cards plus 1, or deal 4 damage to each creature. That would be a pretty good card, right? Yeah, you know what? That's what this is. So if she dies, she dies, but you still get a pretty awesome effect for 6 mana. And on top of that, if she doesn't die, you get more value. So there you have it. This is a fantastic card. This will definitely see standard play, and I don't think I have to say this is a bomb in limited. Next is Cinder Hellion, and here's another really good limited card. I like the fact that you're getting a 4/4 trample for 5. Trample is very, very relevant in limited. The fact that it's entering the battlefield doing 2 additional points of damage is not irrelevant, especially if you're playing Boros and you have the Eldrazi that can flicker cards. You kind of get some extra effects out of this. It could give you some value. I kind of wonder if maybe there's going to be a return to a Bloodthirst type mechanic in Shadows over Innistrad, and maybe this is a hint to that, so keep an eye out. This is Consuming Sinkhole, and this might be a sideboard card in limited, but I think it's a very good one. So let's say you have an opponent that's playing with some Awaken effects, or they have a regular creature land. You side this in, and if that card comes out and becomes relevant, wonderful. You get to exile it at instant speed for 4, and if that particular game it's not relevant, you just hang on to this card and hopefully get your opponent down to about 4 damage or less, and you just finish off the game with this card, or even if you have a couple copies of this card, it can do more damage. So it's actually pretty good. As far as standard goes, it is at instant speed. I would not be shocked to see maybe a 1 or 2 of in some red deck wins type strategies if that becomes a thing in the metagame. 4 damage is pretty significant. Devour in Flames. So this is a sorcery speed removal spell, so that makes it a little less intriguing. However, it deals 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker, so you get versatility there. There is a slight quasi drawback that you do have to return a card to your hand. However, that also could be a benefit in, say, a landfall deck. So this is interesting. As far as limited goes, first, yeah, you're going to be more than happy to play this. This is phenomenal. You'll be able to hopefully protect yourself, take out some big creatures, or deal with the pesky planeswalker. And if you have landfall triggers, even better. You get more value out of it. As far as standard goes, There are some things in Standard, like Siege Rhino and Tassiger, that have 5 toughness, so this might get there, at least until they rotate out. As far as the landfall deck goes in Standard, it didn't ever quite get there. However, it is getting some more pieces in this set, so don't count it out yet. If that deck becomes a thing, this could be part of that as well. Eldrazi Aggressor, and this is a really, no pun intended, aggressive card. This is fantastic. You're going to be able to play the red colorless or red black aggressive deck, and this will fit very nicely into that limited archetype. You put this down, it's a 2/3 for 3. It has haste as long as you have another colorless creature, which is pretty easy to achieve in this environment. So it's a great beater. As far as Standard goes, yeah, if there's a black-red aggressive deck out there, this could definitely be a part of it. Eldrazi Obligator, another really fine, just aggressive beater. You get a 3/1 with haste this time, but what's kind of cool is if you have a colorless and an extra generic mana to spend, you get a threaten effect. And one of the hardest things about really getting there with the aggressive build is once your opponent starts putting out their mid-range creatures, sometimes it just stops your plan. Well, if in this case they put out a mid-range creature, you come back with a 3/1 haster, you steal that mid-range creature and attack in with that as well. That can be backbreaking. So this is a very, very good card for limited. It is rare, you're not going to see it all the time, but it's also strong enough. Again, I do believe the pieces are there for that aggressive, either red and colorless or red-black colorless deck, and it will be quite good in Standard if that develops in the metagame. Embodiment of Fury. Very good limited card here. You get a Trampler, 4/3 stats for 4. That's wonderful. And then there's extra bonuses on top. Lands you control get trample, and you get a landfall ability that basically awakens a land for a turn and makes it a 3/3 every time you play land. That's decent. So this is a really good limited card. Again, I don't know if that landfall deck will make it in Standard and really become a force, but there's a lot of intriguing tools it has in both black and green and Gruul cards in this set. So don't count it out. It could show up. Next is Expedite. This card is awesome. It does so many things. First off, it plays very well into the aggressive build. And you pay 1 at instant speed, give something haste, and you get to replace this card in a cantrips. That's amazing. So this is really awesome. On top of that, this is an amazing surge enabler. So there's so many great surge cards in Izzet, and this can just turn those on. Even if you're simply giving haste to a creature that doesn't need it, you're replacing this card and you're turning on the surge cost for something else. That's huge. So yeah, this is going to be awesome in limited. You're going to play this. Now, it won't fit into every deck, obviously, it just depends on what you're doing, but it's going to fit into probably most builds if you're in red. And on top of that, yes, I think this is good enough to see Standard play. All of the Titans. Now, this is an example of a card you kind of want to be playing for the surge cost. It plays really well with Expedite, for example. Now, having said that, if you can cast this for the surge cost, it's a house because it works at instant speed, and that's pretty awesome. So imagine in a limited game, you can take out 2 rather sizable creatures at instant speed, take out a creature and damage an opponent, or maybe you're playing 2-headed giant, you get to damage 2 opponents. There's just so much versatility here, and I love the fact that it's an instant. It's not as good if you're playing it for its normal casting cost, but it can do a little bit of work. Sometimes it'll help you, especially against an aggressive deck with small creatures. Having said that, I wouldn't be shocked if you saw this make a small impact on Standard, maybe a 1-of in certain decks, just because it can be activated at instant speed. Goblin Dark Dwellers. Now this one's a little more expensive, but it has a great effect. I mean, you get a 4/4, it has menace, and then you get to cast a instant or sorcery 3 or less for free from your graveyard. That's a big swing. That can be very powerful. So yeah, this is a bomb in limited. I think that goes without saying. As far as Standard goes, I don't know what deck wants this, but I feel like someone will eventually figure out a role for it. Might not be in this rotation, but maybe post-rotation. Goblin Free Runner. This is interesting because you really don't want to be playing this for 4. You really want to play this for the surge cost. This to me is a limited card. I'm probably not running it in most cases unless I really need another creature in the 4-drop, or I'm pretty confident I have a lot of cheap spells that I'll be able to play this for 2 consistently. If that's the case, then go for it. 3-2 a menace, if you can get it out on turn 3, for example, is going to be very good for you. And it is an ally, so it plays well with cohort, plays well with any rally effects as well. Immobilizer Eldrazi. So this one is another just beater. I love this card. So you get to play this for 2-1, and it can come in, do a little bit of damage. Your opponent starts playing their mid-range creatures, and if you got colorless mana and these are dedicated blockers, like real strong toughness creatures, you just basically shut them off and they can't block anymore. So this is fantastic. If anybody's plan is to just go ahead and sideboard like the 1/3s, the 1/4s, the 1/5s, especially that you find in the blue and the white cards in this set, this just shuts them all off just like that. This is crazy. So this is going to be an awesome beater for you in limited, and I think it's strong enough that it could perhaps see some play if there's an aggro, maybe black-red deck in the meta and standard. But I think this is meta shaping. I think this is the type of card people are going to have to know exists. So when they start thinking about ways to plan against the aggro deck, they're not going to be able to use creatures with high toughness. I think they're going to have to really think about using the 5/5s, the 4/4s, the 3/3s, those type of creatures, as opposed to the big blockers. Kazul's Toll Collector. So here's another Equipment Matters card. We saw a couple of them in white. There's one here in red. We're going to see another one later that's a Boros card. But it's okay. It's a 3/2 for 3, so it's definitely limited playable. The only thing that kind of makes me sad is it equips the equipment at sorcery speed. I think this would be much better if it was at instant speed, but I know that can also be kind of confusing for new players, and maybe it's too powerful. Maybe the card would have to cost a little more if that was the case. They probably don't want any sort of cranial plating type shenanigans going on, so kind of is what it is. The equipment in this set is not necessarily super exciting. There's one or two good ones. We'll see those when we look at them in the colorless set review, but it's probably good enough at this cost to play in a lot of your limited decks. Not always going to make the cut, but it's okay if you need it. Kozilek's Return. So here's a mythic. This one's a big one. You get a Pyroclasm effect for 3 at instant speed. I'm going to say that again. You get a Pyroclasm effect at 3 for instant speed. That's crazy good. So on top of that, if you happen to be playing, say, the Ramp Eldrazi deck, oh yeah, you get to also wipe out all the mid-range creatures once you play your first like big Eldrazi, and this is in your graveyard. So just imagine this. You're playing the Eldrazi Ramp deck, you're up against a deck that's playing a lot of small creatures, they're going to get in, do damage to you. You get to play this, wipe the board. Then mid-range creatures start coming out. They're going to start coming in and being a threat. You finally get a chance to play your big Eldrazi. You wipe the board again. This is just back-breaking. This card's amazing. It's definitely going to see standard play. Obviously, it has a role in the Eldrazi deck. And on top of that, it's a good limited card. Maybe not as good if you can't build around it, but it's always nice to have a Pyroclasm type effect, especially at instant speed. It's extra bonus if you are playing with some big creatures. It's not going to be for every limited deck. Obviously, if you're in the red aggressive build, this is going to hurt you more than help you. But in a lot of decks, this will do some work in limited too. Maw of Kozilek. I like these pumpers, especially when they're cheap like this. Now, this one does cost colorless mana to pump. You got to make sure you have that available with some consistency. But if you do, this is going to be a really good limited card for you. Next, we have Oath of Chandra. And this is maybe my least favorite of the Oaths. It's not as exciting as others. Let's talk about limited first. It deals 3 damage to a creature that an opponent controls. So yeah, that's okay. You're going to want that in limited and be happy when you have it. So it's going to be a fine limited card for you. Definitely wouldn't hesitate running it. As far as standard goes, if it could hit opponent or creature, I might feel a little better about this card. Then it would feel maybe more like a sorcery speed lightning strike or something. But as it stands now, I'm not super excited about it. I think there's just better burn out there. And the secondary ability, I don't know, it just isn't really that relevant in limited or standard. I mean, even if you're playing a deck with a lot of planeswalkers, I just don't think that 2 damage means a whole lot. I don't know. I just feel like there's better things you could be doing at the 2-drop slot. Now, it does turn on surge effects. It is very cheap, so there are some synergies there. There are some definitely good things about it. It's actually not a bad card. I'm making it probably sound worse than it is, just because the other Oaths are just so good. Press into service. So this is a threaten effect for 5, but you get a support 2 out of it too, so that's kind of cool. And support 2, I mean, obviously it works very well with the go wide ally strategy, but even if you just have a couple creatures, you get some value out of this. This is actually very good. I always like playing threaten effects in limited. Now granted, this is a limited card, but a very good one. Pyromancer's Assault. So this one I'm a little lukewarm on. I mean, in limited, there are going to be some decks that might want to play this because it costs 4. You're kind of taking a turn off to play it. But if you have a lot of cheap spells in your deck, maybe you're doing a surge strategy, you might get some value out of this in the long run. So I could definitely see playing it in certain limited situations. Other than that, though, I just think it's a little too expensive for what it does. If it was more like a storm effect, where you got the effect on your 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and so on spell, well, that's a lot different, but that would probably be too powerful and probably not a whole lot of fun to play against. So that's not what this card's doing. I don't really see it making its way into standard or anything like that, and I just don't think it does enough, especially at its cost in some of the Eternal formats. Reality Hemorrhage. So this is an interesting card. It's an instant, deals 2 damage to a creature or player, a lot of versatility there. 2 damage might not seem super relevant, but there is a little card out there called Jace Vern's Prodigy. So yeah, you know what? I think this will definitely see some standard play, if for no other reason than because of Jace. And on top of that, this is a great limited card. You'll be happy to play it, especially if you're up against some small aggressive creatures. Reckless Bushwhacker. So this card has a very powerful effect to it, especially if you're going wide. So let's talk about limited first. If you're in the ally strategy, maybe you're playing Boros, you're getting a lot of the ally soldier tokens, that type of thing. This becomes very good. It pumps your team, gives everything haste. It has haste itself. You can get a lot of stuff across with a little extra damage tacked on. That's kind of nice. It works well even in green-red decks with a lot of Scion tokens, so it can do a lot of work in those cases, if nothing else because of the +1/+0 effect. It's very good. The surge cost makes it even more economical, so I really like that as well, because paying 3 for this on its own is okay, but paying 2 for it is really, really good. Now let's talk about standard a little bit. Here's the thing with this card. If you had a fair ally deck that was just going wide and just putting a lot of creatures out, kind of like a White Weenie or Boros Weenie style deck, this would be very good. I don't know if that's going to show up in the metagame, but what I know is in the metagame, and which I think will continue to be in the metagame at least for a little while, is Rally the Ancestors. And Rally the Ancestor decks, now this is where this will really shine, and I think this is where it will find its home. So yes, this will see standard play. It's a good card, and yes, limited, definitely play this if you're going wide, or even if you're just in the red beater plan, it's still a good haste creature for that as well. Next is Spark Mage's Gambit, and this is a good limited card if you're in that aggressive build. Your opponent starts playing some mid-range creatures, and this is a way for you to get some more damage across. So it's going to be very good for you in limited. It's also very cheap, so it could turn on Surge, and because its casting cost is so low, I wouldn't count it completely out of standard. I just don't really know where it's going to find a home yet. Next we have Tears of Valakut, speaking of cheap spells. So this is an instant for 2, dealing 5 damage, uncounterable to a flying creature. Phenomenal. So in limited, good card. I would say I would probably just main deck it. There's probably going to be some target for it, but you won't be wrong to necessarily sideboard it in either once you see that your opponent's playing flyers. As far as standard goes, yeah, it's cheap enough, and there's some pretty big flyers out there. Now this is good against Control, however, I think Control is going to be using the 5/5 hexproof Sphinx, so unfortunately it doesn't help you there, but could take care of some other flyers potentially. Next we have Tyrant of Valakut, and if you're playing limited, this is a great card. 5/4 flyer, I don't mind even paying 7 for this, even if I can't pay the surge cost. And I get a lightning bolt effect on top of it when it enters the battlefield. Absolutely, sign me up. This is awesome. So as far as standard goes, it could also get in there. I mean, right now we are playing decks that are playing big dragons, and especially as things start to rotate, this could just become the new dragon of choice. And it's not a bad one, especially if you have a way to flicker it, like if you're playing Boros and you have the Eldrazi that will allow this to flicker, you could potentially get more value out of it. So yeah, I think this is a pretty good card. Keep an eye on this one. Next is Zada's Commando, and this is a cohort card, but I do like the fact that it's only 2, and it's a 2/1 for striker, so it has some very good stats attached to it. It's a very aggressive card. You could play this in aggressive deck and get some damage across, and then once they start putting their mid-range creatures out, now you have the cohort ability to just still be able to get in there for some damage with it. That's actually kind of cool. So if I'm in that build, even if I have a handful of allies, it's still a good card. Now if I'm going more into the ally build and I'm crossing into red, this is still a very good card in that regard as well. So I think this is more of a limited card, but it is a decent one. Now let's move on to some of the multicolor cards, starting with Gruul. Here's Mina and Den Wildborn. So here's another card that plays really well with landfall, and perhaps could bolster that standard landfall deck a little bit. Remains to be seen, but keep an eye on it. As far as limited goes, this is a bomb. You get a built-in exploration, a 4/4 creature, and the ability to give it or other creatures trample by returning lands to your hand, which also could give you more landfall effects. Yeah, this is awesome. This just is a beater, and it's also an ally on top of it. This thing does it all. Keep an eye on this card. Potentially even could see some standard play. Relentless Hunter. So this is a good limited card. It's a pumper, but what I like about it is the first time you pump it, you get trample. And it's a little expensive to pump, but even if you just do it once, you have a 4/4 trampler, which is going to be just fine for you in limited. So the last card of the day is also a Boros card, and it's Weapons Trainer. This is actually another Equipment Matters card, which is pretty interesting. This is now the 4th card we've seen in the set that has that theme, and I wonder if maybe that will play up a little bit in Innistrad. Perhaps this will be a human mechanic. That's how they fight back against the monsters. I mean, the original Innistrad did have a fair amount of equipment in it, so something to look out for in the future. Now, having said that, this is a good limited card. I mean, it's still a 3/2 for 2, and if you're playing with some equipment, you get a little bit of a bonus out of it. A lot of the equipment in this set, and we'll see it a couple days from now when we get to the colorless cards, they aren't super exciting. There's a couple good ones in there, though. So in theory, down the road, could there be a standard deck that's playing with some of the stronger equipment cards? Perhaps. I don't think it's going to be right now, but if there's better tools coming in the future, keep an eye out for that. Now, having said that, those are the red cards for Oath of the Gatewatch. We'll be back tomorrow with all of the green cards. Until then, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day.
Hey, thanks as always for watching. This video, like all my videos, was made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Even a donation of $1 helps me to keep growing this community and creating better quality videos for all of you. Check out our Patreon page for exclusive giveaways and future goals for the channel. If you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the MTG news, spoilers, set reviews, product openings, or finance videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a good day.